What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 14. My name is Victor Vasquez. Thank you so much for everybody coming back and listening. And if this is your first time listening, welcome to this podcast where I talk about different types of movies that I've seen recently, and I try to determine after the first viewing if this movie is considered timeless. For most folks that either have never listened to this podcast before, timeless just means, for me, I interpret it as a movie that I can continuously see over and over again. I see it on TV, I'll sit down and watch it. Maybe I have a specific interest or feeling of watching a specific scene. Well, I'm going to try to pop in that timeless movie, and I just never get tired of watching those types of films. And so today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about the recently released film, a few weeks ago actually, called Last Night in Soho, which is directed by Edgar Wright. Want to start off just my specific reasonings why I wanted to watch the movie. First reason I wanted to watch it was because of the trailer. It gave off very creepy vibes about a girl having a double life. It had a lot of suspenseful moments, so it seemed like it was going to be some type of a horror or thriller movie. Also, from watching some of the clips, it seemed like it was going to take place around the 60s and 70s due to the music that was being played in the background, the attire that some of the actors were wearing. So it was a nice little, different type of either atmosphere or setting of the movies that I would typically see, maybe Marvel related or, other horror films like Halloween Kills, items like that. So it just kind of felt different. Last reason I wanted to watch the film was due to Anya Taylor Joy. I didn't really know much of her work until I saw her in Queen's Gambit last year. She blew me away with her performance in that show, and it just made me a fan. So when I saw that she was going to be playing a part in this film, it got me even more excited because I know that she can bring it from an acting perspective. So again, those were the specific reasons why I got interested in watching Last Night in Soho. And so again, that's what got me into theaters. But now I want to give you my overall thoughts after watching the film. I actually went to go see it at AMC. Overall, I thought the movie was really good. It was a fun, suspenseful movie that takes you through the story of a young girl named Eloise, or Ellie. She's played by Thomasin McKenzie, trying to make it as a fashion designer. But at the same time, going into dreams and visions where she follows a woman she has never really seen before. Now, the movie does a good job to explain that Ellie has been impacted by the death of her mother, and she tends to actually see her mother at random times in their mirror. So for me personally, that actually set up a really good reason behind why Ellie has a different type of sense than other people do throughout the movie. And again, I think it's a really good transition as to not only does she start seeing her mother, but she also jumps into these weird visions that I was mentioning before, where she would be placed in the 1960s. Now, Ellie's character could be considered an old soul. She listens to a lot of vinyl records. Even the way she dresses throughout the film at the beginning is very 60s inspired. So again, it seemed like at the beginning of the film, when she would first jump into those weird visions when she would go to sleep, she actually enjoyed going into those. She follows a character named Sandy, played by Anya Taylor Joy. Both Sandy and Ellie seem to be in similar spots in their lives in the film. Both are trying to make it big. Ellie, again, like I mentioned, as a fashion designer, while Sandy wanted to become the next big singer. Now, this dream that Ellie is in follows Sandy going into a club, meeting a man named Jack, who was played by Matt Smith. Jack would end up becoming Sandy's manager and try to give her the chance to make it into show business. These dreams obviously would end, and Ellie would wake up and, go back to reality. But she began to pull images from those dreams in order to help her as a fashion designer and use those concepts really to develop dresses. For example, in the first vision that they go into, Ellie sees Sandy for the first time and she's wearing this very nice pink dress. And so she uses that same kind of concept and she tries to build out that dress in real life. Another reason why Ellie enjoys those visions is because, to her, they're not real. They're people that are just kind of made up, and she doesn't really understand why she's having these visions or why she's going into them. But as the film goes on, Ellie realizes that these dreams are really not random. Rather, she's witnessing events that actually took place in the 1960s in London. Sandy is an actual person, and we see her life get worse and worse as Jack, her manager, instead of getting her big events, ends up placing her in a role as a backup singer and a backup dancer. And eventually, as the story goes on and the visions keep playing out, she ends up actually being used as a prostitute for wealthy men in order to get them coming back into the club, spending their money at the club for more and more stuff. That way they get even more clientele. You see her start spiraling out of control, and Ellie has a front row seat to see Sandy kind of just losing herself. Where the film really picks up is when Ellie sees Sandy actually get murdered at the hands of Jack. The movie then turned into a murder mystery where Ellie's trying to find Jack as she gets the feeling that he's actually still alive as an old man that wanders around the streets of London. I'm obviously not going to ruin the movie, but there is a great twist that occurs at the end of the film that wraps up the story very nicely. For me, the film did start a little bit slow, maybe at a pace that I wasn't anticipating, but as more and more dreams occur, the film gets even better and better. Another aspect of the film that I really liked was the music. Since the dreams revolve around the 1960s, various different hits are playing in the background, and they just add so much more elements to the film. Whether it's the different dance scenes that you see Sandy and Ellie in, or even Ellie trying to interact with Sandy, the music plays a big part in the entire experience. I also want to say that there's some really good jump scares in the third act of the film that almost got me. I'm not saying that I'm all this big tough guy. I typically just don't flinch when I'm watching different types of scary movies because I can see it coming. But how they set those up were just really good, just very good timing, and it almost had me flinching. So really good job by the director Edgar Wright to have those specific jump scares pop out and just make the film that much more suspenseful. But I can honestly say that the movie was just very good and even scarier than Halloween Kills, which is really intended to be a horror film. And this one, again, just proves why it's even better than that film as well. I really enjoyed my time overall, and I'm really glad I went to go see this at AMC. All right, now that I've kind of given you an overall breakdown, very high level, didn't want to spoil it for you. But now I want to jump into the next segment, which is me breaking down who my favorite character of the film was. Now, before I kind of jump into it, I do want to give credit. I want to give credit first to Thomasin McKenzie for, again, playing Ellie. She did such a good job kind of switching. You see her as a very young student, as a fashion designer, very naive to the world. And then by the end, she becomes experienced just because of those visions. I also want to give a shout out to Matt Smith. He ended up playing Jack. And he, again, did a great role. He had this creepy vibe about him as well. So you just knew that you couldn't really trust him in the specific scenes that he would appear. But I really enjoyed Anya Taylor Joy as Sandy. Her character just demanded a lot of attention when she first came on screen. She was just so confident and so interesting. And you could see in those visions she was striving to make it as an up-and-coming singer. You know, to have to deal with like the pain of not being a star and really being used by a pimp in Jack. You could just see her going through so many different emotions. Once again, we see her at her peak when she's auditioning and she's trying her heart out to make it as a singer, all the way to basically the twist at the end of the film. It's just unbelievable the way that she's able to perform as Sandy. And again, it just shows how talented Anya really is. Wanted to circle back, she did a tremendous job in the scene where she was getting up on stage to audition. And she sang very well. And I believe Anya actually did sing one or two songs on the actual soundtrack for Last Night in Soho. So it just goes to show you how talented she is, not only as an actor, but as a singer as well. So Anya Taylor Joy, congratulations. You have my favorite character of Last Night in Soho, which is playing Sandy. All right, now I want to move on to my favorite scene or moment of the film. Now, I think the scene does come out in the trailer, but I do want to give off a mild spoiler warning. So if you have not seen the film Last Night in Soho, feel free to skip ahead a couple of minutes as I just explained one of my favorite scenes. Okay, hopefully that was enough time for you to kind of skip ahead. But the scene actually revolves around the first dream that Ellie ends up having about Sandy. Once Sandy proclaims that she's going to be the next big hit to Jack, she proceeds to show off her moves and hits the dance floor. Jack follows right behind. But what is so awesome about this scene is that the entire dance seems like it's one continuous shot in the film. Jack ends up dancing with Sandy, but in the blink of an eye, switches to Ellie, and now they're both dancing. And then again, due to Ellie living through Sandy's visions, that's the reason why you see them kind of switch back and forth. But Once again, the scene proceeds to have Jack dancing with both women at different times and different cuts. And the camera moves so fast that you can't really tell when they're switching between Sandy and Ellie. And I thought it was so cool. The music playing and blasting in the background. It was, for me, just my opinion, the coolest scene of the film. And it really gives you a sense of, how Ellie gets a little bit of comfort in these visions. She ends up enjoying that specific dance and moment that she ends up coming back every single night as well. Another element of what made that scene even better was, again, the music that was attached to it. I mentioned it a bit earlier, but the music was a great touch throughout the movie, but especially for this dance sequence. It was just very upbeat, got you really into it, and again, made you feel that comfort of like, man, this is going to be, it's going to be good for Ellie to kind of see this interaction between Jack and Sandy and have her experience this of what an interaction could have been like in the 60s. So great job by Edgar Wright and the rest of the team for this awesome dance scene. All right, now I want to jump into the next segment, which is, would I recommend this movie for you guys to go watch it either in theaters or wait for it for streaming or DVD? Overall, I thought this movie was a great experience in theaters, but to be honest, you could probably wait for streaming or DVD to watch this film. Now, I'm all for supporting movies in theaters, so if you do love the theater experience already, or if you have some type of a pass like AMC A-List, definitely go out and see this in the theaters. Once again, the music, you'll enjoy it a little bit more, kind of blasting through the surround sound. But really the only reason I offered to wait for streaming or DVD is just due to not seeing much of a difference between, watching it in theaters and then, visualizing it at home. For example, if I were to throw out a movie like Dune, I would definitely recommend you go watch it in theater because, again, the different visuals, the cinematography of Dune, it's much more enjoyable if you would have an enormous screen at the theaters with a great surround sound. Compare that to Last Night in Soho. It doesn't really need a huge screen, as really the main part of this specific film is the story that's being told. And really the narrative of the entire movie can really be experienced the same whether you're in the theaters or you're watching it in your living room. Now, I want to repeat this one more time, but the music does sound awesome, and so I can definitely see why that would be the biggest difference maker between watching it in your living room and watching it in theaters. But I don't think it's that big of a factor as well. So either way, I highly recommend you watch this movie. All right, now we are in the last segment of the Timeless Movie Podcast, and that's really the most important question. Is this movie timeless? In my personal opinion, it definitely has the potential to be a timeless movie. Coming out of the theater, I was very much hesitant of saying it could be timeless, but I can totally see myself after watching it a second or third time considering this movie a great movie to rewatch just because of the suspenseful moment, how the story kind of goes from beginning to end, and then again that twist that I didn't see coming, which is always great for me as well. Now, I think the twist, kind of thinking back, why I want to give this the nod for a timeless movie, is especially when you kind of are going through and it's a murder mystery, you're trying in your head to think, okay, I think this is how it's going to be laid out for me. And when you realize that it's nothing for what you thought, it just makes my experience more enjoyable. Different people might have a different thought process on that. But to me, that twist is one of the reasons why I want to give it a timeless nod. Another reason for why this movie might be timeless would be the performances by Thomas McKenzie and Anya Taylor Joy, as well as Matt Smith. They all did an excellent job in the roles, and they all just grab your attention when they're on the specific screen as the story unfolds. And once again, broken record time, but the music also adds so much to the film. I think it made an impact on me, considering that a lot of the songs that they were used were from the 60s. Now, I'm no expert in 60s era music, but the sound just made these scenes much more enjoyable, and it just elevated it to another level. And it made the experience very different when you were in reality with Ellie, going through fashion school and items like that, as compared to when the scenes changed to her visions. The music was completely different and drastic. So again, just adds to another layer of why this film could potentially be timeless as well. Guys, those are my thoughts on why Last Night in Soho has the potential to be a timeless movie. But more importantly, I want to hear from you. What do you think about Last Night in Soho? Have you gotten a chance to go see it? If you haven't, why not? Is there something in the trailer that just didn't interest you? And if you have, Tell me what your favorite scene was as well. Alright guys, thank you so much for coming back and listening. Just want to throw a quick plug. If you haven't seen or heard any of the previous episodes, I will be posting those right here at the end of the video, so you can click on them and go ahead and listen. Once again, I thank everybody for coming back and listening. This has been Victor Vasquez of the Timeless Movie Podcast. I'll catch you guys next week, in which we're going to be covering the Netflix film Red Notice. Alright guys, have a great rest of your week. Thanks.